1, 2, 3.
All right, how you doing today, class? I'm Devontae Hudson.
Sorry. Okay, go.
How we get questions?
Go.
Right now?
Uh-huh.
Okay. That's right. How you doing today, class? This is Devontae Hudson. This is Cory, Carlson. And we're going to go through this interview, ask them a few questions. First and foremost, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Cory Carlson. I grew up in British Columbia, Canada, and we moved to the States when I was 14, and then I went on to school at Arizona State for psychology, IO psychology, and then I went back, well, before I went to school actually I was in the military, and then I went back to school, and then after school I re-enlisted as an officer in the military. I went back in the military, and then I got out of the military and received a master's degree in clinical psychology, and then now I'm here at Prairie View working on a PhD.
Okay. And you mentioned your military, your time in the military. Is there anything that you can tell us about what you experienced while being in the military?
As a police officer?
Yes,
Military police? Yeah, I was in the Air Force first, and it's called Security Police Law Enforcement. So I was a field officer, and when you're first assigned, depending on your rank, it's what you do. At first, it was just patrol. Actually, when I got to the base, it was kind of funny because we couldn't use radar guns because we had all this training and stuff, but when we got there, because it was in a foreign country, my first assignment was in Germany, Ramstein, and it was about 8 months before the wall came down. And someone had aimed their radar gun at a fighter that was taken off, F-16, and so they got locked on, and they shot straight up in the air because they thought they were locked on by someone in the woods, created a sonic boom. So when we pulled over people, we had to pull over people based on assumption that they were speeding. So a lot of times we'd patrol and we'd pace, and in the military that can hold. And usually a ticket, if it was with the military personnel, it went to their commander. Okay.
And being that you were in the military, with today's society, all the massive shootings and bombings, how would it have affected your duties as an officer, even though they are not happening in the state of Texas?
In the military? Like, okay, most of my military service was overseas, so I don't think it affected it too much. I think once you've been in the military, though, and you've been trained in weapons and stuff, because I come from a background of my family, my dad's side's from Canada, and they're hunters and stuff, and I think more military people would say that they're in favor, actually the ones I've talked to, my friends and stuff, in favor of stricter gun control limits and background checks and stuff.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. So, what other areas of the criminal justice field do you wish to branch out to into the future?
Oh, just teaching and doing research with juveniles.
Okay, so for the most part, you will say that you've accomplished all that you want to do in the field?
No, I want to work with policy in the field, but meaning to be physically hands-on in the field anymore, like policing or corrections, no.
All right. Why did you not wish to continue your studies and get a PhD?
What? I'm working on a PhD.
Okay.
He's working on his PhD. Describe one of your most memorable cases or situations at the Children's Mental Health Hospital.
Oh, most of the time, a lot of the children who come in a mental health situation have either behavioral disorders or family functional disorders, and not necessarily psychiatric disorders. So the ones who came in that had true psychotic episodes were the best. I mean, you feel sorry for the kids, but I mean, a lot of times they were textbook cases. Like one time we got this, I think he was 16 and he weighed about 600 pounds, and he had schizophrenia, which is really sad because he's right at that age where schizophrenia sets in, between 15 and 25. But most of the time schizophrenics are very peaceful. Like all he did for the first 2-3 weeks, all he said was peace, love, and happiness. No matter what you asked him, what do you want for lunch today? Peace, love, and happiness. So that was probably one of my most memorable.
Can you describe like the most difficult case or situation that you had to deal with at the mental hospital?
Well, since I was a therapist, I really didn't have to deal with much that was like, you know, any kind of aggressiveness or fights or anything. I would say probably one of the most difficult situations mentally for me was when I was doing an intake for a 7-year-old girl. And we have a set of questions we ask on an assessment. And one of the questions is, and I almost thought about bypassing it because I was thinking 7. And one of the questions is, are you sexually active? And she answered yes to it. And so that was kind of difficult for me, you know, it was just, you know, it took me back for a moment, you know.
Wow. So did working at the Children's Hospital affect you personally at all?
I think so in a way. I think you open your eyes up to that there's a greater need in the public for institutions and mental health resources that a lot of people can't acquire, you know, either by they don't have the economic resources, the fiscal resources, or they just don't know about it. Because your average kid, if they even think something's wrong, like they're depressed or something, they're not going to go and, you know, seek out mental health help on their own. Usually someone has to guide them there, and unfortunately a lot of times it's too late when they enter the court system.
Okay, so what were your reasons for leaving the hospital, or also leaving being a corrections officer or the military police?
Okay, military police, I did my time, and I served in 2 wars, so I had enough of the military. Even though, like, my family was like, oh, stay in and get the retirement, but I didn't want to be in another war. Leaving corrections was when I decided to go back to school, so I actually took a leave of absence at first, because I didn't know if it was going to work out. Because I went back to school at a later age. I was 28 when I was a freshman. And then with the juvenile institution, Liberty Hospital, that was an internship for the clinical psychology program. So even though it was paid, and paid very well, I might add, it wasn't something that I knew I was going to be long term, and plus it was in Louisiana. I didn't plan on staying there.
So would you have done anything different after departing from college?
When I depart from college, you mean?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I have a job lined up already in South Carolina. I'm going to be teaching at a university there. But if I had to do things different all over again, we discussed this in class before, yes, I would be a veterinarian. I would if I had to start all over from college, I'd go the veterinarian route. Because I do have medical school, I have 3 years of medical school.
That's
and
like
the first year we actually had veterinarians in with us, students, because you go on the same path. You take the same similar classes, like the anatomies and organic chemistries and physics, and then after that you branch off into your specific areas.
That's such a far branch off. But what led you to teach here at PV?
Oh, I came here for the juvenile justice program. So teaching is just part of the process.
Okay. And what advice would you have for students who seek to pursue a career as a police officer, corrections officer, or therapist?
I would say you got to do what you like. I think therapy, being a therapist, is very enjoyable, but it takes a lot of schooling, certification, and licensing, depending on the state too. Correctional officer is not well paid. It's a very intense job, stressful. Police officer is intense and stressful also. But I think like the pay is better, and the time. And plus you don't, even though being a police officer, when you're going out, a lot of your job isn't just, it's not like cops. You know, most of your job is just assisting people, a lot of times just in the community with other things, you know. they'll call up or ask you to pull off to the side. But in corrections, you're always there with criminals. Not all of them are criminals, some are probably innocent, but you're always in that situation. And you gotta be careful, 24/7, because you get shanked, or something can happen to you. So you always have to be on your toes. So I don't recommend corrections for anyone with an education.
Yeah, that sounds kind of rough.
Because you don't need a degree to be a correctional officer.
Okay. Generally,
In a lot of communities, you don't need a degree for a police officer either. A lot of times, I think it's an AA degree they want you to have.
Okay, so seeing that you say that you probably wouldn't need a degree for either of those, would you rather, or which do you feel requires more from the person, being a police officer or a corrections officer?
Requires more as in what?
Mentally, physically?
Probably corrections. Because sometimes as a police officer, you can kind of, free your mind, and you're not always, it's not like cops again, you're not always running and chasing people. A lot of time, actually being a police officer, sometimes it's very boring, especially if you get the night shift. After the bars close, that's your main time, and then from then on out to the morning, not much happens. So it can be very boring, but in corrections, you have to be watching all the time, observing, and really investigating, asking questions. So it takes a lot out of you. It's very stressful, high anxiety.
Okay. How did your experience in the criminal justice field